Welcome to Lecture 8 of the lecture series Psychology of Well-being. And today we are going to talk about the second kind of research method that we utilize to study well-being in this particular course on psychology of well-being, and that methodology is qualitative research methodology. Well, what is the need for having the qualitative research methodology? Or before that, let's try to get into the entire rationale for having this particular methodology. And that takes us back to the whole idea of new paradigms, which are nothing but the social constructionist and critical theory paradigm that emphasizes on understanding with the help of joint mutual interactions, the points of view of human beings or human well-being, which have been shaped by diverse kinds of social, cultural, or socio-political realities of people. And we find that in those joint constructions of meanings, nothing but a particular methodology that is open to meanings, that is open to communication between human beings, that is open to creation of research space where rather than hierarchies of researcher as the knower and research participant as the knowable entity. So that hierarchy is actually replaced by a space which is humanizing for the research participants, whereas a human being, one can share one's own experiences. So these new paradigms actually have been the foundation for this kind of methodology that focuses on human meanings, experiences, and worldviews, and try to get closer to that with the help of human communication or human relationships. So that's why forming research relationship becomes very important here, and we'll be looking at one term called reflexivity, which is nothing but researchers' critical awareness of his or her own experience or perspective, besides also the role of empathic connection or being able to connect experientially with the other person that helps in the formation of research relationship. We'll also be taking examples of how within that research relationship interviews or interactions do take place. And then we come to the important element of analysis within research. So how do we analyze qualitative data? In the previous lecture, we saw that analysis of data in terms of digits or numerals involves quite a bit of statistical or mathematical procedures. But here, in analyzing the meanings, narratives, stories, observations about people's life, what kind of analysis takes place? Does it begin with uh, some kind of considerations that about researchers' own perspective or experiences, or does it happen in experiential vacuum? So these are the things that we are going to see as far as analysis of a different kind of data, which is qualitative data like stories, narratives, meanings, or cultural discourses are concerned. And then we'll also be taking examples of analysis and reporting of the research with the help of a particular study conducted in 2010, which is 10 years ago at IIT Kanpur, and we'll be taking examples from that. And the entire lecture would end with the criteria of scientific rigor of qualitative methodology or qualitative methods. Okay, so let's begin with the first question, that is, what are these new paradigms of social science inquiry? And we have some answers that we are familiar with, because these concern several overlaps and the considerations of those overlaps between social constructionist paradigm and critical theory paradigm. Well, an integrated view of these two paradigms is something that is warranted, and it's important that we take a look at that particular integrated view, which is presented next here. So the new paradigms, again, we have tried to integrate the ontology, epistemology, methodology, and axiology of social constructionism in the critical theory paradigm. What does it say in terms of the nature of reality? So human worldview and experiences are taken to be socially constructed or shaped within cultural, sociopolitical, or gender-related dynamics or the context. Multiple facets of the phenomena are comprehended or understood using multiple sets of data as well as interpretations. Well, epistemology in both these paradigms or the new paradigms involve empathic relationship between the researcher and the participant, so that experiential connect somewhere, that one is able to experience what the other person is going through, at least to some extent, in terms of varieties of experiences or similarities between those experiences that people may have in general. And then methodology, which is joint constructions of meanings, joint creations of meanings between the researcher and the research participants. By creating space for participants' voice, about their concerns and lived experiences to be shared within that space or humanizing space. So communication between people or interactions amongst people in some humanizing space becomes very critical as far as understanding people's life or people's experiences of well-being or other diverse kinds of experiences are concerned. Here we are focusing on the experiences related to well-being. And axiology, again, what purpose does the research findings or do the research findings or the research process in itself serves to the research participants? And we see here that usually such purpose is decided in collaboration with participants, aiming at empowerment or emancipation from forces which are cultural or sociopolitical in nature that may have denied participants their own voice. So again, getting back to the focus on this particular thing called um, methodology that we need to take into account within this particular set of paradigms called the new paradigms. And this particular methodology in itself that have been encircled here is taken to be the qualitative methodology, which is concerned about creating or joint creation of meanings between the researcher and the participant by creating humanizing space for them to voice their concerns and lived experiences. Let's see how does it unfold itself. So qualitative methodology to study well-being. So qualitative methodology is situated in the domain of new paradigm that focuses on joint constructions of meanings, as we have been repeatedly seeing here, between the researcher and the researched by creating space for participants to voice their concerns or lived experiences. So well-being or having good life or existence are about experiences shaped by the prevailing cultural as well as sociopolitical context. As we noticed, qualitative methodology that pertains to, again, I beg your pardon, there is a typographical mistake here, typographical error, that pertains to new paradigms also invites researchers to work towards documenting the individual or community level processes that facilitate well-being, particularly among people facing challenging circumstances in life. So that is the promise of qualitative methodology in the study of well-being, as it focuses on the experiences that have to be studied within the social, cultural, or socio-political contexts. Okay, so how do we form research relationship? There are two important concerns here related to the processes that facilitate researchers' attempt to build a human relationship with the participant. First one is reflexivity, that is researchers' awareness of his or her own experience or perspective. How does it help in forming research relationship? We'll take some example to study that. And then empathy, being able to experientially, beg your pardon, connect with the participant. Well, I'll be presenting below an example of forming research relationship with the help of my study that was that aimed at exploring the experiences of well-being and mental health among the survivors of an earthquake that struck Kutch in India, Gujarat state of India in 2001. Let me take you to one of such vignettes or cases or life story of one of the participants, Nirmala Ben, who was a middle-aged woman in her mid-40s. She could not bear any child before her husband passed away in the earthquake. Now, it was an experience of getting overwhelmed by realizing suffering that she went through. Um, while I tried to initiate an interaction with her by asking her about the work she was engaging in those days. So, after a silence of about 2 minutes, she slowly uttered a sentence which meant in Gujarati language, something, I do something. Kai kai karu chu. So, that is Gujarati, and the English meaning is something, I do something. Then tears came in her eyes, and neither she nor we spoke for about more than 10 minutes. These minutes of silence posed to me some serious questions about my role as a researcher. Was it ethical to interact with her when there was a risk of her feeling disturbed about the traumatic incident? My gut feeling told me to just be existentially or experientially um, with that person, even if there was no talk, and hope for some more communication that might help her feel better. But again, it was difficult. It was a difficult time. The minutes of silence did not seem to be coming to an end. So clearly, she felt overwhelmed while talking about what she was going through after the earthquake. Well, with tears in our eyes, I indicated after the silence to Sudhakar Bhai, who accompanied me as a key informant, as a translator, because I could not speak Gujarati, or I could understand a bit, but I could not speak. So I needed one translator, and he also was a key informant who could help me getting to know about people, getting to know about the community. So I told him to, I indicated to him to tell her, take rest, and we would come again to meet her because that fieldwork was for about 1.5 to 2 months. So I had time to get back to her again. She responded out of her commitment towards her guest that we would have to take tea, which she went to prepare. There was an insistence in her voice. After a while, she quietly served us tea. Well, after that particular occasion, we could also um, meet several times after that. But then it's important for me to point out that whether or not we could have a humanizing space for her. So that was the question that I was facing. So, for ethical and pragmatic reasons of avoiding to take her back to experience of being overpowered by intense emotions during which she might recall her traumatic experiences, I could not ask her throughout our interactions in all the three phases of fieldwork. Three phases would mean that I went for 3 consecutive years for about 1 to 2 months of fieldwork in that particular village of Kutch, where I interacted with these participants. So I could not ask her whether serving us tea gave her a sense of being a responsible human being, thereby giving her a sense of coherence or meaning. But it was clear from our interaction that happened about 10 months later in phase two, or the second round of fieldwork, that she had found an empathic listener in me, and with whom she could share her experience spontaneously and authentically. Well, then, in our interactions, we could also see that it served some useful, some meaningful purpose to her, because she could see that um, it also helped her reaffirm the whole values that were important in her life or the life of the villagers, and she was one of them when she was interacting with me. So interactions also had this effect of reaffirmation of her own moral status or moral way of life as a villager in that particular um, part of Kutch. So, in the second round of fieldwork, that is phase two, about her present life condition, she said, "My two nephews stay with me, sending them to school, looking after them, offering my services at the ashram of Mansingh Baba, a Hindu priest of the village, and to do satsang, which is in a gathering, a priest sings or provides sermons, and people listen to them or sing along with that particular saint or priest. So that satsang keeps me engaged the entire day. My work, satsang, and devotion to God are everything to me. Well, after all this, something else also happened that told me about the value of not only reflecting back that we saw earlier, because when she was in the first round of interaction, when she started crying, and then later on she went on to prepare tea for us, I was reflecting about my own experiences and my own reason for conducting this study, my own understanding about well-being and all. But then besides that, something also happened that told me about the empathic bond or the experiential connect between the two of us. And that's highlighted here in terms of continuing bond, revalidating the self. So when I asked her whether she felt like avoiding interactions with me, as these might have reminded her of her loss. So this interaction was happening in the last phase of fieldwork, when I was about to come back from the field, from that village where I was conducting this study. So, so this question of whether she felt like avoiding interactions with me, as these might have reminded her of her loss, a symptom of post-traumatic stress in the disaster. Her reply was, Tame premti pucho cho tyare bik lagto nathi, which means in English, you interact with compassion, therefore I do not feel sad talking to you about the incident. While taking leave from her, when I said that I wish to come back to the village again and meet the villagers, she answered back smilingly and with a force in her voice, Tamne avuj padshe, which means you shall have to come. So that tells us about that empathic bond or the empathic connect that could be possible with this resolve that we can create humanizing space with people who are our research participants if we have that resolve and that patience to be um, a witness as a human being of their varieties of experiences of well-being, of growth, and also of sorrow at times. Well, so that was about forming research relationships. So when we have the data available in terms of interview narratives or field notes as qualitative data, we proceed towards analyzing the same. That involves two basic processes. First one, researcher considering one's own meanings and or theoretical positioning on the subject matter. For example, one may be interested in the meanings of well-being or the meanings of relationship, for example. And the second one is, as the researcher go through the qualitative data collected through interview or observations, he or she compares and builds upon his or her own meanings or theoretical understanding by adding on to or revising those initial meanings that one might be having as a researcher, as a human being. So these are the two basic procedures for for the beginners in qualitative research, which are highlighted in the literature on qualitative research. Let's take some example from a UG project, undergraduate research project conducted at IIT Kanpur. And we find that a research student, her own meaning and theoretical position of what relationship is, because that project was on understanding the meanings of relationship and its value for one's own self, one's own growth or well-being. But the focus was on the meanings of understanding the meanings of relationship. So that began with, again, writing down her own meanings and theoretical position about relationship. It was about a bond based on some common set of requirements like mutual understanding, care, and concern, two-way communication, and so on. And some sort of interaction is always needed to have a relationship. So her initial position was the bond that could be based on common set of requirements like care, understanding, concern, and it did require some sort of interaction because communicating these mutual understanding or care is indeed important for a relationship. From there on, from this initial meaning that she upheld, she went through six set of data that came from other students in that particular project. So the first set of data, I'll just go through some of these sets of data because you can always read it on your own, but I'll go through very slowly so that you can also can read it at your own pace. Some people find that if they interact with others due to some professional reasons, then also it is a relationship. But others find that to name an interaction as relationship, there need to be some kind of attachment between people. Level of relationship depends upon intimacy and closeness, based on which each relation has a different significance in our life. Thus, here we get two viewpoints. According to one, relationship means any type of interaction. According to the another viewpoint, we can only say that there is a relationship if there is some sort of emotional attachment amongst people. So that was the first set of data that came from uh, so each of these six sets had at least 7 to 8 members, student members in that particular group, from which this kind of meaning of relationship could be derived. So such consolidated meanings became a set of data for this particular student. So she went through this first set. Then she also went through all the other sets, like, I would like to just quote them. I mean, such narratives or such data. So, set two, if there is an understanding between persons and there is no communication gap among people, among persons, then we can say that there exists good relationship among them. And to develop such a good relationship, some sort of continuous interaction over a period of time is needed. Again, this has its own parallel with that student's um, own meanings too. Anyway, so set three, it told us that there exists a relationship between two people if there is a mutual understanding between them. They also expect some things from the other. There is a two-way communication among them, and they understand each other completely. Also, relationship gets affected by environment and previous experience with the person. So, understanding completely, mutual understanding, and affected by environment and previous experience with the person. Set four, basic meanings of relationship is the same for all, but people differ about what they mean by importance of duration and types of relationship. According to some, relationship is long-term bond, but others think that even a short-term bond can be a relationship. Also, if there is some negative feeling between people, some people consider it as a part of negative relationship, and others refuse to see it as a relationship. So that was set four in terms of the meanings of relationship. Set five, all types of interactions, whether temporary or permanent, results in a relationship, and these relationships give us an identity. Okay, so it talks about relationship giving us an identity. Kind of relationship depends upon how we are connected to other person. And then set six, relationship can be defined as a connection between the people based on feelings which may be positive and negative, resulting in positive negative relationship. Feelings get influenced by level of interaction affecting strength of relationship. The relationship is positive if there is mutual trust, respect, and caring among people, and weakens if some expectations are not met or purpose not solved. So, after going through these six different sets of data, the student or the researcher compared and built upon her own meanings by adding on to or revising her own meanings. because when we read these 6 different sets of data, these might have their own parallel or perhaps not much of parallel with my own meanings of happiness or my own perspective on happiness, or sorry, relationship that we are talking about here. So she came up with the following insights with the help of this exercise of comparing and building upon her own meanings while she was going through this set of data back and forth. So these insights about meanings and aspects of relationships involved: number one, relationship may be of short duration or long duration, but what is important is how we get connected with people we are interacting with. She also says that this theme was running only in some sets of meanings, some sets of data, excuse me. Yet it is a good point to consider the importance of duration. Okay. So, and the second insight that she could develop about the meanings or aspects of relationships: this is not necessary that the bond we are talking about is always positive. There may exist negative relationship. This is an uncommon theme, she points out, but some of the people thought that negative feelings give rise to a particular type of relationship which can be considered as a negative relationship. I found this meaningful. And the third one, relationship gives us an identity. Yes, so this is another very important addition to her own understanding of well-being. Sorry, understanding of relationship. So relationship giving people an identity. This was an uncommon theme, but yet it is true that our personality gets affected and even built by how we interact with the people and and the people around us. So uh, people around us who have some relationship with us. So we see that how relationship may affect one's own self or identity, and that becomes an important element to be considered while we try to define what relationship is for us. So these are the insights that she could develop after analyzing the 6 different sets of data that we just now saw. Well, finally, as we have gone through this particular exercise or this particular lecture on understanding the paradigm of um, study or social science that focuses on the joint constructions of meanings, that involve the new paradigms, social constructions paradigm and critical theory paradigm. And from there on, we see that how in those joint constructions, forming research relationship with the help of empathy or reflexivity becomes important, and then analyzing the data becomes also a part of it. So finally, coming back to the criteria of scientific rigor within qualitative research, again, the key concern is going to be whether and how we are able to form research relationship, that human relationship within research activity, and what are the ways in which different criteria would help us get close to this particular kind of exercise to explore subjective experiences of people within the context. And we find that the first within that criteria is reflexivity, because it helps the researcher becoming aware of one's own experiences or perspectives, because it also helps in trying to find out that whether or not there are some parallels or there are some kind of divergences with what other people are talking about. And we need to understand that not only that people do differ from us, but how we can try and incorporate those newer insights vis-a-vis or in relation with our own insight. And that's exactly where reflexivity becomes important. But besides that, we find that credibility is another important concern as a criteria of scientific rigor within qualitative research. What does it say? Using a systematic procedure in research, right from locating one's own meanings or perspective as a researcher, or formulating research question, to choosing a paradigm of inquiry, like the social constructionist or the critical theory or the new paradigm, then analyzing data, and to the presentation of results. We need to use a systematic procedure in research, because only then such procedures can be traced back in terms of various steps that are involved in the research practice. So both reflexivity that entails or that helps us build empathic connection or research relationship with people, besides an analysis of data. Credibility overall is another important criterion of scientific rigor within qualitative research. So I hope you have enjoyed this particular lecture on qualitative research methodology for studying well-being. Although we took the example of the struggles of well-being and also the sense of growth through my own study on earthquake survivors, and also later on a study amongst people, amongst the students, that was conducted by a student in her undergraduate project. Yet it might have given you the nitty gritties, the basic ingredients of qualitative research methodology. Thank you very much.